Good afternoon, Liberty friends. My name is Dan Fishman. I am the Executive Director of People for Liberty, and this is People for Liberty's broadcast of Liberty on the Border. As people know, there has been a situation brewing on the southern border for, I don't know, the last 60 years, and different administrations have come in, different policies have been tried. The one thing that has remained constant throughout all of this is the suffering, both of the people who are coming to the border and the people who work at the border, who are forced to make terrible decisions that they know affect people's lives and view and sometimes, have to cry along with everybody else that's happening. And so our event today is something where we talk about the people who are trying to help. And it's going to be about us making efforts to help the helpers. I'm joined, as always, by my People for Liberty colleagues, President Joe Jorgensen, Vice President Holly Ward, and founder of People for Liberty, Lauren Postler. Hey guys, thanks so much for being here today.
Hey, good to be here.
So I want to talk about this first idea, that this event is one where we're looking at the people who are actively trying to help. We're not saying this is how we solve the border problem. We're not saying this is the method to either stop people from coming or to increase people coming or anything like that. We're just looking at the terrible things that have been happening and talking about the people who can do things to change them.
Absolutely.
So in that method, we've put together a great list of speakers, but I think that, some of us have immigration stories of our own to talk about, what it's like to come to this country, because we are fundamentally a nation of immigrants. And Dr. Jorgensen, you gave one that I heard on the campaign trail, and I'm hoping you can share it with our audience again today.
Yeah, well, first of all, it was my grandmother that gave me the love that I have for my country. 3 of my grandparents are immigrants that came here with nothing. Now, let me point out, my grandparents didn't become super rich or anything. They just wanted to come here for freedom. And a lot of people, when they asked me about immigration, because, some people think, well, is our country already too big? Whatever. Should we have people come over? And I say, we need a lot of people like my grandparents who came over here, who wanted to make a life for themselves, who wanted to work, who wanted freedom. Because when you have the incentive to start your own business or to improve yourself, that's the kind of people we want in this country.
I get to be the pleasure of being the inaugural. Dan, you're muted.
All right. You raised such an outstanding point there, Joe, because you talk about the people you want to come to this country. And a story that I wasn't planning on telling today, but one of the things that I like about you, Joe, is that I'm going to start calling you the Liberty Chef, because you stir the pot and great things come out of that. I was just talking with one of our guests who's coming up, Martha Bueno, about hurricane season. Anybody who knows anything about the rebuilding of New Orleans after Katrina knows that there was a large population of Hispanic immigrants who came in and were working incredibly long hours, diligently, in places where, a lot of people had evacuated, so the local people weren't there. That made a huge difference. In Ike, in Galveston, same thing, the rebuilding. Go ahead, Jeff.
And can I point out, it's interesting that you brought up Katrina, because I was thinking about that as well. For those of you who didn't hear, so many people are like, well, we need the government to do it, right? They think if the government doesn't do it, it won't get done. Well, maybe people aren't aware that there were private companies, private individuals sending water bottles to the people in Katrina, and the government was turning them away and saying, no, we don't need you, go away. So that shows 2 things. First of all, that you don't need the government to get stuff done. Individuals and organizations will do it. And secondly, that usually the government does more harm than good.
Well, Joe, I love that you bring up the organizations and voluntarism where we see a difference. And that's our broadcast today. We are going to be interviewing organizations that are doing the tough work at the border. They are nonprofit organizations, non-governmental, and they recognize that there is a humanitarian crisis. I live in Texas, I live in Houston, and I can speak from personal experience, seeing the human suffering of people who have come to this country in hopes of a better life and who have suffered at the hands of our government? Do we want to be known as a nation that punishes people seeking freedom? I think that has always, struck me as someone who values freedom, who values personal liberty and individual responsibility, that we are punishing people for seeking that.
And it goes so contrary to one of the most emblematic symbols of liberty. At the base of the Statue of Liberty is Emerald Lazarus's poem. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses. And then it ends, I raise my lamp. That's what we want to do. We want to raise our lamp and say, this is it. This is what liberty looks like. The light gets brighter the closer you get to the United States. And so if you're coming here seeking that flame of liberty, we want you to feel welcome.
And Dan, I'm glad you brought that quote up. I was going to talk about it, so you stole a little bit of my thunder there.
Sorry.
But again, putting the idea of people before politics, and somehow we've made the immigration crisis at the border about politics, and it's not about people. And liberties and freedoms, they don't depend on a border, right? Your liberties and freedoms don't stop at a border. These are people that have lives, have individual rights. And the fact that we've made it so political almost insinuates that it's less than that, or it's something different. And we have to remember, first and foremost, that everybody here is a person. We're talking about people today.
And that's one of those really critical elements that, we say people before politics. I like to say that, there's a difference between what people have a right to and what we have a duty to provide them with. And I think about that all the time. I feel that I have a duty to care for my fellow man, and recognizing all the suffering that's going on. We're fortunate to have a great lineup of people who are going to be here to talk about this stuff. I want to just come back to you, Dr. Jorgensen, with one thing about it. You were out there on the campaign trail, traveling around. Was this something that people talked about to you a lot? Was there a lot of talk about what's happening, about people who wanted to be free, trying to come into the country? Because I know that story of your grandparents must have resonated with people.
Yeah, in fact, what surprised me is I would have some people, because immigration is one area that I would say right now is a bit contentious in politics. We've got very polarizing sides with the right and the left right now. And I would have people come up to me and say, so you want people to be able to immigrate here, right? And I would think, oh no, like preparing for a battle, right? And I would say yes. And then they would say, well, that's good because, my daughter's trying to marry her husband. He's over in, whatever, Germany, whatever, and they're not letting him over here. And I was surprised at how many stories I heard just from average people saying, yeah, we've got a friend or a relative trying to bring somebody over here and they're just not letting anybody in. And I think that's, right now we're looking at the border as a crisis, but you got to look at the cause. And the cause is that they don't have a reasonable immigration system that allows people to stand in line and come in who want to come in.
And I think that is, that's the line we want to draw and say, we recognize where we are. We recognize the humanitarian aspect of this thing. That, anybody who's waited in line knows how frustrating that is. But imagine waiting in line for your freedom. It's a situation that is almost intolerable. And we're lucky to have a lot of experts here today. And Lauren, I think you are going to lead off our next segment where we talk about a couple of the experts who are here.
Yep. I'm excited, Dan, that we have Casey Daly and Martha Bueno here with us this morning. Casey was a powerhouse behind the Let Her Speak movement, and she helped to lead our Peaceful Warrior Day event last year as well. So she truly embodies, part of our values, which is people before politics. And Dr. Joe mentioned the crisis of immigration and, the lack of sound policy. And we have to consider the fact that there has been such a culture of fear around immigration, around people from other countries that has been permeated by both sides of the aisle, that we've forgotten to put people first.
Yeah.
And Casey, I'm so glad you're here today and that you asked us. You said, hey guys, this is an absolute crisis. We have lost the people in favor of the politics when it comes to immigration. How can we help highlight the organizations that are doing the tough work? So Casey, talk to us a little bit about your inspiration, and then we'll bring in Martha as well.
Yeah, so immigration is one of the main reasons I got into politics. I mean, in the first place, I'm in Texas like you, so it's always been, and I have seen all sides of the issue. I have argued all sides of the issue and policy, and over time, you just see that the problem is so nuanced and interconnected, and it gets more complicated as the government gets involved, and that really there is no government solution. I mean, there really isn't at this point, and so we'd have to bypass all the government and all of the cronies getting paid on the backs of immigrants and just get back to the heart of the problem, which is it's a humanitarian crisis. And the only people who are doing good in this space are the nonprofits. And that's some of them we're going to be talking to today. And we have a collection of people and companies that we have researched, and so we'll send those information out too. So my goal for this is for people to be inspired and to just hear some nonprofits that speak to their heart, and encourage them to take action. So no matter what sides of the fence you are on immigration, my hope is that something is going to trigger you to say, you know what, forget government, forget policy. I just want to help this organization do better and do good.
Well, and Casey, you mentioned that we're going to be sharing with people after the event. Towards the end, we'll show where on our website you can sign up for additional information. Each of these organizations will be talking about ways you can get involved or volunteer or help amplify and support their efforts. So to Casey's point, we hope everyone is inspired to put people before politics, to show how voluntarism in action can help make a difference. I think that people get caught up in the economics of libertarian principles and that we're all about capitalism and free market, but that's not at the expense of people. And that is not at the expense of caring for our fellow man, as Dan mentioned. That part of the libertarian ethos and principles is collectivism and voluntarism, that we do not require governments to get shit done. And that includes how we can help and support one another. So in addition to supporting the free market and economic principles and Second Amendment rights, we are all about people banding together to help one another without the aid of government, without the force of government. 100%. And I'm so excited that we have Martha Bueno with Libertarios Hispanos here to join us. Martha, one of the things that you recognized last year was there was not a voice for the Latin American people in the liberty movement. And I love that you and Casey connected last year during Dr. Joe's campaign. So why don't you two tell us a little bit about how you met during the campaign, your efforts together. Martha, you were one of the first ones to say we need to go to the border. We need to visit the detention facilities because this is a crisis and people are unaware.
Yes, so thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to be part of this event for People for Liberty. The border is a big issue that I care about a lot. For those that don't know me, I am a Cuban American. My parents emigrated to this country, and as Dan said, this was the beacon. This was the place to come, the shining city on a hill that accepted people like my parents, who my father was a political prisoner in Cuba for attempting to leave. And that's something that just freedom that was instilled in me my entire life. And I see so many people who are desperate to come to this country, not because they want to be in America, but because they need that freedom, because they don't have it in their own country. And so I connected with Casey last year during Dr. Jorgensen's run for president. I had reached out to Dr. Jorgensen's campaign, and I really wanted to be involved in getting the Hispanic vote out there, letting Hispanics know that there is a third option. It's not all right or left. There's this other group that believes in all of your freedoms. And Casey was doing some amazing work with the Let Her Speak campaign. She, grassroots from her kitchen table pretty much was able to get a caravan of people all around the country to go out and say, you know what, we think that there should be this voice on the debate stage, and we want that voice on the debate stage. As we know, partisan politics, et cetera, we didn't exactly get what we wanted. But I think it brought a lot of people to the movement. And Casey was absolutely, an inspiration. And I got the chance to meet her in person out in Texas. And I think we've become lifelong friends. And I'm so happy that she's, involved in this issue and this cause. It's something that we desperately need.
And Casey, when we think about bringing people to the movement, that's been part of your goal as well. So thinking about immigration and the humanitarian crisis at the border, when you think about bringing people to the liberty movement and how this issue can be kind of a banner for people to rally around, tell us about your thoughts there.
Mm-hmm. I think as long as we're not partisan about it, right? It's like we want to bring people in and encourage them to do good work and show people that we are pretty much the only people who care. We're the only people who actually want to do something and want, care about it or talking about it. And so I think that alone is going to bring people to the liberty movement to see maybe there is a different option that's not duopoly, because the duopoly is not helping and doesn't matter, so and we've been seeing it for decades and decades, and now it's like maybe this is the thing that will get people to say, okay, we need another voice here, we need another option. So yeah, maybe we'll see.
Well, and you very graciously asked Martha with Libertarios Hispanos to help interview the organizations that are coming up. Martha, let's talk a little bit about Libertarios Hispanos as the voice of the liberty movement for our Spanish-speaking friends and for Latin American libertarians. Tell us a little bit about your efforts and how it got started, again, as a grassroots initiative last year.
So it started organically. Like I said, I reached out to Dr. Jorgensen's campaign for president, and I said, you know what, there needs to be a voice in the Hispanic community. And we started translating her speeches, and my friend Zach Foster, who will be on a little later, and I, there was nobody else really to do it. So we decided to go for it. And then when the campaign wrapped up, we realized that there was this need that wasn't being filled, and we wanted to continue to do so for the remainder of the next 4 years and make sure that community has some sort of representation, has somebody reaching out. And it's just grown immensely in this last year. We've now made contact with libertarian groups all throughout Latin America. Cubans, there's actually libertarian Cubans in Cuba. And they've spent some time in jail, unfortunately, in Cuba, because freedom obviously is not, they're not free there. So being part of a political party there is a crime. But it's amazing to be able to work with these organizations. And our goal is to just continue to spread freedom here in the United States, within the Latin American community and within Latin America, because freedom, as we keep saying, it doesn't end at our borders. Freedom is for everyone.
And for those that are meeting Martha for the first time, and her partner Zach, who we'll have on later, Martha has a Cuban-American immigrant family, Zach is a Mexican-American family member. They have the ability to reach out into those communities. And we know that the Latin American voter base is the largest growing. So the average age, and these were some stats that blew my mind, the average age for Latin American potential voters, they aren't old enough to vote yet, is 11 years old in this country, which means that a new Latin American voter is born every 30 minutes in our country. The average age of white or Caucasian voters in our country is 58. So let's talk about our future here. And when we think about our future, and as a nation, how those tides have shifted and how things have changed, we need to be engaging and learning from, our new voters. What policies do they care about? What are the issues that are important to them? And that's one of the reasons we're talking about immigration today, why we're here to learn from the organizations that are doing the tough work at the border. As a former social worker, I was going through the mission and the vision and the values of these organizations, and I'm so impressed. So Martha, I think that you are really, going to be energized and excited about talking to Christy, who's up next, and to all of the wonderful leaders who are doing the tough work at the ground level with the people the people that we hope to put before politics today. So Casey, thank you again for your inspiration, for always bringing wonderful ideas. And I want to encourage everyone, if you have a great idea, we want to hear from you too. You know, Casey is a banner leader in this movement for grassroots efforts. If you have a great idea, we want to talk, we want to amplify those efforts and help you make change in your lifetime too. But Martha, I'm excited to turn it over to you and these organizations. So thanks, Casey.
Thanks so much. I am really excited to talk to these organizations. It's very inspiring what they're doing. We're bringing attention to them, but they're really doing the incredible work. So thank you so much, Christy, for being with us. Christy is with an organization called National Immigration Forum. And Christy, if you'd go ahead and give us a little bit of background what the organization does. And of course, we want to hear about you and how you got involved. But let's start with the organization first.
Yes, thank you. It's such a pleasure being with you guys today. The National Immigration Forum is a nonpartisan organization that, in a nutshell, we are calling to fix our broken immigration policies. So at a kind of macro level, you know, as Joe was saying earlier, the reason why people are coming is because we don't have a working immigration system that gives people regulated ways to come very often, especially if you're fleeing oppression very quickly from Central America. If you don't have a postgraduate degree, there's no legal pathway for most folks. And so we're asking people around the country to call on their elected officials, whoever they are, to fix our broken immigration laws. And so I'm a consultant, and I work with a project called Bibles, Badges, and Business. And so how this kind of works on the ground is I work with faith, law enforcement, and business leaders. And we're kind of educating folks around the country. And like, I sit in little living rooms talking to sheriffs and business leaders and pastors, and we're talking about, you know, what are people's economic questions around immigration? Like, immigrants are good for our country, but that's not often the story told. So we're providing education in that realm. We answer security questions. So we have a whole network actually of police chiefs that do a lot of that work for us, talking about what's happening in their cities and how actually we want to create a sense of safety, that immigrants feel like they can trust the police, so they report crime, and that helps us all be safer. And then my background, I was in Christian ministry overseas as a missionary for many years. And so I do a lot of Bible teaching that, you know, for people who, like me, believe that the Bible is our authority. It says so much about what it means to welcome the stranger. So I work a lot in the faith world as well as with all these other constituencies.
That is absolutely beautiful. So how can people get involved? What work do you see needs to be done on the border? What are the things that people can do to help if they're so inclined and, you know, get in touch with you guys?
Yeah. So one, there's so many, as you guys are highlighting in this session, there's so many amazing organizations doing work directly. And so I won't step on the toes of folks who are coming. But we work with, folks all across the border who are doing grassroots care of migrants. Paperwork they're processing as lawyers, or they might be feeding people who are just arriving. Everything you could imagine. And so things like the Keno Border Initiative, Catholic Charities working with Norma Pimentel in the Rio Grande Valley, Ibarra Frontiers in El Paso is doing incredible work. And you can take that all the way over to, I think it's the Baptist Association on the Tijuana side of the California border. And so we highlight a lot of the work of the folks doing direct care ministry or care work on the ground. But also I think what I would call folks who are listening to this is get educated. So right now it's so politically convenient for folks to say, these very simple tweetable short lines like build a wall or open borders, but those don't solve anything. People are coming because, especially at our southern border, they're fleeing violence, they're fleeing cartels, they're fleeing hunger, they're fleeing poverty. They're fleeing the collapse of an entire government like Venezuelans are at the moment. And so the question is do we want to leave folks in the hands of smugglers who have to come the irregulated way to seek asylum? Or Do we want to fix our policies, work with the kind of push factors that are driving people to leave their homes and their families to come and seek asylum, which is a legal process, which I think that's even another one. Sometimes people say if people come to the border, it's illegal. So like I get to educate and say, oh no, that's legal. It's been a policy since 1951. We created it out of the abundance of refugees after World War II. So it's like, that's legal, but I don't want people to travel across Mexico to come. So by calling your lawmakers, particularly senators, and your houses of representative members, like calling them and saying, hey, could you fix our broken immigration system, whatever party you are, and asking for more increased visas so people can fly here on a plane ticket legally, but also asking our government to address some of the push factors. It's not a tweetable line. It's a complex situation, and we need to, we always talk about at the National Immigration Forum, the need to be a nation of laws and a nation of grace. And so the kind of narrative out there is we can only have one or the other. And it's like, well, I can have increased border security and I can have increased checkpoints or funding for technology that could help us catch drugs. And I can also have more compassionate care resolutions. And whoever's in office nationally, I can complain to either president and say, hey, we want to see better solutions. And so when there is something wrong, like raising your voice in a respectful way and calling for change.
That is very important. Absolutely. I think that we need to raise our voices and call for a change because whatever we've been doing just isn't working. I know that you talk a lot about the economics of the situation, and that's the biggest pushback I get from people that I speak to. Could you maybe go a little bit into that? Just give us a very brief on why is immigration, maybe even good for this country?
Yeah. Well, so I'll give you two examples that if you pull any economist out there, whether they're libertarian or conservative or liberal, and just do the numbers on immigration, immigrants bring money into our country and they start businesses. So I wasn't an immigrant, I was born here, and I have lived that out. If you're an immigrant, 80% more likely to start your own business. I was born here, I didn't start a business. And so if they just kind of track the native born population versus immigrants, the people creating out of nothing are immigrants. So there's an entrepreneurial spirit that comes with being an immigrant. And then whether your job is you're a farm worker and you're picking blueberries or apples, or you're a doctor and you're working at a mega hospital as a surgeon, as an immigrant, they've tracked it that there is a below downstream and upstream creation of jobs that immigrants bring into the country. So that's one. But the second one, and I'll put this in the notes that people can share if you want. My executive director, Ali Noorani, and a guy named Danilo Zek, who's a policy expert at the National Immigration Forum, they have just authored a paper this year called Room to Grow. And if you study the trends in the US in the next 25, 30 years, we are not replacing ourselves as Americans with our birth rate. And so we're at under 2-to-1 in terms of birth rate. And so what that means for us economically is our biggest populations are those who are Gen X, baby boomers and above, and our smallest are everyone who is younger than that. And so what that means for the future of our economic system is if we're not replacing ourselves through birth rate, we're going to have a huge group of folks who are retiring and needing benefits and not as many in the workplace. And so the only other way, unless we suddenly make everyone have loads of babies, and that's not just, we don't want to encourage forced anything, is I'm with you on the liberty thing, is to actually increase immigration significantly. And whether we're increasing it through visas, but also our 11 million undocumented, if we created legal status for that, it literally brings billions into our economy that then goes into taxes, it goes into stuff that serves everyone. It pays the fire department, it pays the police chief. And so those two factors, and it's one of the things we're calling for again at the forum is we've been kind of logged in these right and left, loggerheads, there's no other option, is, one way you can solve the status of the undocumented is a process called restitution, which is neither amnesty nor it's mass deportation, but allows undocumented immigrants to pay a fine and then have a clear pathway towards green cards. And currently right now, we just don't have that. And so the option is split families up entirely, which is not humane or just. And so things like that are like really practical solutions. We're saying, any American, no matter what your political persuasion, can push and call folks to fix this. And that's what it would do for the average American. So Americans around the country who are insecure about jobs and possibilities, if you just look at the numbers, a great organization is the New American Economy and Cato Institute. They have done some really great numbers looking at the impact immigrants have into our economy and how it actually ends up benefiting native-born Americans as well as the immigrant community.
Thank you so much for that description. I think it's so important that people hear the other side, that immigrants don't always weigh on this country, but actually provide a benefit. I think that's so important to discuss. So very briefly, we are going to come up now with our next guest, but I would love for people who are interested to be able to reach out to your organization. Where can they go? And what type of assistance do you guys need?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. So you can go to immigrationforum.org. We've got a ton of resources on there. I'd say one thing, you can sign up through the website or you can contact me, cstats@bbb'immigration.org, is we send out weekly updates on how Americans can advocate for the vulnerable, how we can advocate for immigrants. So for example, we've been paying attention to right now in Texas, some of the places that migrant children have been kept is not humane at all. And so people can watch that in the news and then go, what do I do? And so we will talk about that in our notes every week and then say, this is who you contact to make a difference and to change that. When parents and children were getting separated at the border, it's like, this is what you can do to fix that. This is the right person in office to contact. And then in terms of general immigration reform, we do that. We also offer free events. So whether it's your church or your community group or your town council, if something like this is interesting, we would love to come to your community and help you host something and dialogue. We're nonpartisan again. We have mostly center-right and conservatives involved with us, but we'll take anyone. And so, linking arms together to get this stuff fixed. We partner a lot with other organizations like the Bush Institute, Cato, et cetera. And we just believe that, like you guys, there's been too much back and forth, and we need to solve some things. We need to give dignity to people and treat them well, and treat people with the human worth and dignity that they deserve.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Chrissy, for taking this time and being with us today, and for sharing your organization. We really thank you so much for what you're doing. Up next, we have Laura Coleman, and she is with Asylum Seekers Sponsorship Project. I'm sorry. Hi, Laura. How are you today?
Hey, Martha. How are you? Sorry, I got the time wrong. And
no, that's okay.
So you're gonna see me wave my hands around and fiddle this whole time.
No worries. So tell us about ASSP. What are you guys doing? What is your project?
So, the core of our work is finding sponsors and communities to welcome migrants and asylum seekers into their communities. That's the very basic nature of our work, but that's not our goal. Our goal is, in bringing people into our communities, we transform the way we live and we become a more gracious world of welcoming, resource sharing, collaboration, learning from each other, and taking care of each other. Ultimately, our hope is that as people build their communities around, sponsorship of a migrant or a migrant family, they get as pissed off as we are. And, they stomp their feet and yell loud enough to do something about these systems that we live under.
Absolutely. So how does that work? How does that, how does one adopt an immigrant family? How does that work? Just can you run us through what this means?
Adopt a family is kind of, we're talking adults here, so we're not going to adopt anybody. But welcoming somebody in, our asylum system as it stands today is unduly burdensome and filled with obstacles that people have to surmount. Our hope is that a community will step in and provide a platform, a jumping off point for people to begin their lives while they're waiting to hear from the courts. And so stepping up, providing shelter, providing food. I don't know how familiar you are with some of those obstacles, but for example, people aren't allowed to work or aren't even allowed to apply for a work permit for 365 days past the point they apply for asylum. So, we have to rely on each other to provide shelter, food, basic necessities, medical care. Asylum seekers are not eligible for any services. Medical care, legal support, on and on and on. And so if we come together, it's completely doable. It sounds daunting, but when you have a team or a group of 30 people, hey, what's one more plate at the table, or 5 more plates at the table?
That is absolutely true. So just reiterate that. I think the point you just made was so important. So for people coming to this country who leave everything behind in their own country, have to find a way to support themselves for 365 days without a job. A lot of them don't have families, don't have friends here. So they're coming with nothing and they have to figure it out. And so I guess that's how you can help people, is maybe help them survive those 365 days of not being able to support themselves and not be able to. I think that's important because a lot of people in this country just don't know what our laws are like. They've never had to experience it themselves. And so I know that I'm shocked every time I hear these type of things, hearing that we expect people to support themselves is daunting, to say the least.
It's quite paradoxical that we want to call immigrants a burden to our society, and yet we don't want them to work.
Right, right. And do we know why that is? Why we would have a law that says that you can't work for 365 days?
I'm not a legal expert.
Just one of those things, huh?
Really, it's yet another obstacle in our what I call our deportation system, our immigration system. It is absolutely not a way for people. It was not created to provide a smooth pathway for people to come here and succeed.
Tell us about yourself. So what got you interested in this cause? Why do you care?
Because I have a heart. I care. When I first started working outside of, when I finished college, started working, I worked in a neighborhood center in a marginalized community, and our primary populations were Hmong and Latinx. And I just really got to know people. And the more I got to know people, the more I realized that the injustices there, and
Absolutely.
the inhumane way we treat people. and I was looking for something I could do. And the opportunity to sponsor somebody came up a few years ago, and had no idea what that meant. I'm not an immigrant. I had no idea what that meant. And I signed my name to the dotted line and said, yeah, I want to do this. Finally, you gave me something I can do.
That is amazing. The world definitely needs a lot more of that. So how can people contact your organization? How can people help?
They can go to our website. It's asylum sponsorship. I don't know what it is right now.
Asylumsponsorshipproject.org. Asylumsponsorshipproject.org is the place to go.
You can also email us at sponsorshipproject@protonmail.com. We host monthly webinars on sponsorship and what it means. And there are many, sponsorship is not the only way. You can be part of that community. You can be a resource gatherer. You can do research. You can, if you're a lawyer, you can donate legal time. If you have a salon, you can do people's nails. I mean, there are all sorts of ways to pitch in. You can be constantly calling your representatives, congressmen, and saying, this is not who I am. This is not who our communities are. And we need to fix this. There are just lots of ways to plug in, from letter writing to calling your congressman to giving someone a room in your house.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much for taking the time and being with us today. I sincerely appreciate your efforts and what you're doing and educating us, because again, I think that not enough people know what's going on. And so thank you again for coming on and sharing your organization and sharing your passion for this project. I appreciate you and salute you for what you are doing. Thank you so much, Laura. Up next, we have Cesar Espinosa, and he is, hi there, Cesar, how are you?
I'm great, and yourself, how are you doing?
I am fantastic. Tell us about your organization. What is it that you guys do?
So FIEL is an immigrant-led civil rights organization. We were established in 2007, just as a small little club of dreamer students, of young undocumented folks who wanted to make a difference in our community. And what we thought was going to be a small little club at my mom's house turned out to 12 years later, turned out to be, 14 years later, actually, turned out to be now the largest immigrant rights organization in the city of Houston, and one of the largest in the country. So we do advocacy on immigration reform. We do a lot of education on immigrants' rights, but we also do a lot of respond to what the community needs. Right now, we literally just left a vaccine drive event. We're trying to get our community vaccinated, et cetera, to just try to help out as many people as we can.
Wow, you guys are out today vaccinating people. That is an awesome cause. It's great to hear. So FIEL, which means faithful in Spanish, is the name of the organization, and it is for families and their education. Can you tell us where people can go to hear more, to collaborate, and what exactly you guys need help with?
So the shameless plug is that people can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, at FIEL Houston, and folks can go on there, see what campaigns we're running, see how they can help out, write to their Congress member, and donate as well. What a lot of people don't talk about is that a lot of this work requires, contributions from supporters to keep our work going. But, something that costs no money is you can always share our content on your social media, help us gain momentum to whatever it is that we're doing. Because I heard in some of the earlier speakers, I heard about them talking about the Children's Detention Center. We actually are keeping a very close eye, and I was able to visit the latest detention center that was open here in Houston. And thanks to the advocacy of FIEL in the community, we were able to shut down this very nasty center. And there's a lot of articles that came out about it. So you're more than welcome to Google us and see how we were instrumental in shutting some of these centers down, who are obviously showcasing human rights violations. So we're out there and we want to do what's best for people. We want to do what's fair, and we welcome feedback and we welcome as much support as we can get.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself. What got you involved in this cause? I mean, I can only imagine that we're both Hispanics, and there's a passion that we share for our fellow, Hispanics, fellow countrymen. But tell us about yourself. What got you in this?
So I'm glad that this is a 3-hour broadcast, so we can go from the beginning. No, I'm just kidding. I myself am a first-generation immigrant from Mexico City, Mexico. My family brought me here when I was 5. When I was 5, I wasn't really given an option of whether I wanted to come or not. It was just like, hey, pack your luchadores into this little bag and here you go. We're going to go to this place where you don't know the language, you don't know the food, and you certainly don't eat burgers with a fork and a knife because that's not the American thing. That's not the American way. And so I came here. I went to some of the best schools in Houston Independent School District. I graduated from one of the best high schools here, or if not the best high school in HISD. And when I was going to go to college, there was a lot of roadblocks because I am an undocumented person. And in 2004, when I graduated high school, these conversations weren't even happening. The spectrum of help wasn't even there. So I became very frustrated because I got accepted into a couple of Ivy League schools, and when I couldn't go, I thought that it was time for us to do something about that and change that. So for the last 14 years or more now, 17 years now, we've been advocating for just access to education for immigrant students, and then that led to the creation of FIEL, and for us to begin advocacy not only to allow our students to go into higher ed, but allow them to get a pathway to citizenship. I'm currently a DACA recipient, so I have the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals permit, but as we all know, every 2 years I have to renew that and pay into the system, and it's not really legal status. I more carry permission to be in this country for 2 years at a time. It's more of a promise that they won't deport me in those 2 years. It's not really them saying, you can stay here for the rest of your life. And as you can tell, I've grown up here. I love Texas. I consider myself a Texan at heart. But unfortunately, because of the broken immigration system that we have, I haven't been able to become fully American, even though I'm American in every single way, I believe.
Absolutely. And, it would be an absolute, I can only imagine how scary it would be if they do, if they ever do deport you, you've grown up your entire life here. And I think that's what people don't understand is you don't have maybe a place to go back home in Mexico, or there's no,
Absolutely.
People create their lives here and would like to stay here. And so, I feel for you. Absolutely. In this case. And unfortunately, you're not the only DACA recipient. You're not the, and there's so many people that are going through this. So it's, I appreciate you telling the story. I want to shift a little bit and go to the detention center. What are those like? What are those really like?
So when we went into the one that was here, opened up in the north side of Houston, it was first of all, let me just paint the picture for you. It was a warehouse. So there was no AC. There was no there was a room, but they had capacity for 500 kids, and it was kind of towards the slump of the pandemic. So we were coming out of the pandemic, but still you had little girls who didn't know each other, like sleeping right next to each other, crammed into quarters. One of the things that struck me the most was when you walked into the biggest room in this center, or in this proposed center, was that the girls were separated by pallets with boxes on top of them. Nobody could tell us what was in those boxes, if it was safe or not, if it was going to explode. Whenever we asked the question, what's in the boxes, everybody said, we don't know, but we'll find out for you. And that was unacceptable to us, knowing that there was little girls sleeping right next to these boxes every single day. So we brought up a lot of the concerns. There was a series of events that transpired after we visited, including an employee dying at the center. And so we advocated for a long time. We talked to a lot of elected officials, and finally, the Health and Human Services decided to shut the center down, which we thought was the best option. Now there is a center to replace it in this place, but unlike the first center, this is literally a welcome center that's run by the Church of Latter-day Saints. They welcome people there. They give them they buy them bus tickets. They help them to buy their bus tickets or plane tickets, and they're free to leave at any point. So those are the kinds of models that we want to create. We don't want we should not be talking about children being detained in cages in this day and age, but rather we should be finding solutions like these welcome centers that the church now has opened up.
Absolutely. There has to be a more humane solution than to putting people in what I like to call cages. I don't know if that's a good description, but
Yeah.
there has to be a better way that in America we can treat people than just locking up into cages. So thank you. And again, how do people contact you guys? How do they donate to your cause? I think this is such a worthy cause. For those that are watching, please, if you do have a few dollars that you could spare, these are all great organizations. We have vet them all, and they are doing the good work. So the website is fielhouston.org. And so what type of donations do you guys need? Is it just financial, or do you accept other types of assistance? How can people help?
We accept the in-kind donations as well. Folks can also come volunteer. They're in the Houston area. They can come volunteer. We do take interns. But full disclosure, when I say interns, you're not going to be sitting at a desk for 12 hours. You're going to be hands-on in the community, knocking on doors, talking to folks, making sure. So a lot of the interns that have come through our program have said it's one of the best experiences that they had in their life, just because we don't just, give people busy work. Rather, we give them real community work that they can use for whatever path they decide to take in life. So those are the types of helps we need. We also do disaster recovery. So if or when another hurricane hits Houston, we do take food donations and water donations, because we make sure that we turn them around and give them right back to the community where they belong.
Absolutely. Dan is saying you are a rock star. Absolutely. I concur. This is such a great organization, and I'm so grateful that there are people out there doing this work that needs to be done. These people are here, and they're not going to go anywhere. And so, absolutely what you guys are doing is fantastic work. We appreciate it. And is there anything else you want to say about this experience that you've had here, about this organization? Anything you'd like? The floor is yours.
Well, number one, I want to thank everybody who's watching. Really important for a lot of reasons. But if you're watching this on the live stream, please share it with your friends. This is not information that we should keep to ourselves. We should, just like we use social media to share memes and all of that other stuff, this is really good, valuable information that our community and every community needs. And we should really, for those folks who may have questions, these are great forums to ask questions, because we're having open dialogue. We're having real honest dialogue, and we welcome folks' feedback, and we welcome any questions that you may have, because sometimes we make decisions based on assumptions or things that or hearsay, and it's best to talk to the real source, and we are the real source. And we thank this event and the organizer of this event for inviting us, and we look forward to working with y'all.
Absolutely. And I agree. I've been a victim of that myself. If you look just at the news and you see, and you can get angry and you can maybe get frustrated, but you don't see the actual issues that are happening. So I think, letting people know what's really going on and how these people are being treated at the border, at our borders, in America, in the land of the free, how people are being treated. It is so important to get that message out. So thank you for taking your time on a Saturday to come from, that important work of helping to vaccinate people who probably needed that assistance of getting closer to the vaccines and getting all of that work. So thank you for what you are doing. I certainly appreciate it. And we are sharing the hashtag act the number 4 liberty. I don't know if there's one that you guys are using to help promote these issues.
We use hashtag join Fiel. So in whatever event that we do, we always hashtag that so people can know some of the work, and they, more than anything, they can join us to make a difference in our community.
Thank you so very much, Cesar. And again, Cesar Espinosa with Fiel Houston. Thank you for joining us. For those who have been on with us, thank you for watching this. We still have some great guests coming up. Please don't go anywhere. And for those that are just tuning in, we are talking about issues with the border and people and organizations that are doing the work that really needs to happen. Right now, we're going to go with Tori. Is Miss Tori Salas available? Hello, how are you today?
I am fine. How are you?
Great, fantastic. So Tori, you are with Interfaith Welcome Coalition. Could you give us a little information as to what that is?
Yes.
A little bit about the organization?
This organization has existed since 2014. We are recently got our nonprofit last year. It's a faith-based movement meeting the needs of asylum seekers, refugees, and at-risk immigrants with the collaboration of others. What I mean by collaboration of others is I'm the coordinating director, and I'm the point of contact in which I will contact places like Catholic Charities, Episcopals, Latter-day Saints. They're assisting us here in San Antonio, the city of San Antonio, and various other individuals assist us in serving the immigrants that are coming through San Antonio, either through the bus station or the airport. Since March 1st, we have already served 22,948 immigrants coming through San Antonio. This organization also is volunteer run. I am the only staff in the whole organization. Everybody else is volunteers. Without volunteers, we wouldn't be able to do this work.
22,000 people have been over 22,000 people have been served. Yes. That is amazing. Those are amazing numbers. So can you give us maybe more specifics on how you help these people, what type of work you're doing?
Okay, as people coming from the border through San Antonio, going to their sponsors, we provide them with backpacks with food, either hot food or a shelf-stable food. We provide them with blankets. We give the kids toys, coloring book, crayons. And then, too, we also do navigation, letting them know where they're going, where they're stopping. A lot of the immigrants may not even have their tickets, so we end up purchasing tickets. Some of them do not leave until 2 or 3 days later, so we'll put them up in hotels. And 2, we'll provide transportation. We try to do everything at very little cost to the immigrant as they're going to their sponsors. And the best part is anything we do, they're very grateful, and it gives you a really good feeling. This is why we get the volunteers, because it really warms up your heart. The simple things we do means a lot to the individuals. We also do a lot of case management. Recently, we had a family who was released by Border Patrol, sent to the hospital because one of their kids has a burn unit. We are sending hospitality people to go give the mother and the other child food. So they're getting the food. They don't want to leave the hospital. So we're providing whatever services we can and making sure that when they're released from the hospital, that they get their tickets wherever they need to go so they're not wandering around San Antonio. And also we're the welcome committee. We're the link to their sponsors. And 2, we also have partners who, if they don't have sponsors, our partners work to finding them sponsors, long-term shelter. We do have a shelter that we work here in San Antonio. Catholic Charity has apartment buildings. So we're working with the entities to provide more resources. I know Latter-day Saints are looking into helping us do a respite center if possible in the future. So all this partner make it possible for us to be Team SA to serve the migrants that are coming through.
That is amazing work. And so tell me a little bit about how you got involved in this project. What brings you to helping others, to this voluntary action that you help people with?
When I applied for the job, it was making a difference, feeling good. I used all my administrative skills to continue to raise funds so that the volunteers could continue doing the services that they need. I am a native to San Antonio, so it was just being friendly, welcome other immigrants as well, because I feel that the situation in Haiti, for example, people have the right to be safe. People have the right to live in a safe environment. We cannot be determining who goes through what borders. If they're going through the process, they're doing the legal process. So we want to be there to make sure they do get the service they need. That one family that I told you also qualify for refugee status. So now we're linking them when they go to their sponsor to go to the refugee services so that they could get the assistance they need right away. So there's a lot of resource navigations that we're giving the migrants, because the migrants don't know this resources exist in this country.
That is very true. There are a lot of resources that it's very hard for people who maybe don't speak the language to be able to connect to these resources. So that is equally very important work. You're absolutely correct in helping, connect the dots, connect them to these things that they need. And so where can people go to help your organization? What is the biggest thing people can do for you guys?
What people could do for us, they could go into our website, Interfaith Welcome Coalition, and sign up to be volunteers. We need so many more volunteers with this number that we're serving, and is getting increasing higher numbers. We need people at the airport. We need people at the bus station. We need people to deliver food. I need people to help me move equipment from one area to the other, because it takes a lot of manpower to make sure that the bus station people have their backpacks, their food, and whatnot. So we need different segments of areas that people could assist us. Either they don't want to do direct service because they may not feel comfortable. They could help deliver food. They could help move things around and just be an assistant. So they, first of all, if you're going to be providing direct service, we do background checks where we want to make sure the migrants are safe, that nobody's being taken advantage of. So we do background check. But if people don't want to do that part and want to do just the logistics, we could also do that without doing background checks, because they'll be working directly with me and not the migrants. Of course, we always need donations. Because what we also do that's unique about our organization, we are seeing what's occurring in the border, not just in Texas, but in Mexico. So if we notice that right now there's a high need, because there's lots of people stuck in the shelters in Mexico, so we'll send them funding. We'll help all the other organizations in Mexico with our funding that's non-restrictive. So it benefits us, because as the migrants going through, they have the resources that we're providing to the shelters and other organizations in Mexico as well. So we work from San Antonio all the way to Mexico.
Oh, wow. That's a big area you guys are covering. So definitely we need a lot of help in getting you guys volunteers and things.
Yes, the biggest
things are always needed.
Volunteers always needed, donations always needed. And knowing that our donations, we're very careful with our donations. We give to all the other organizations that need help around the border, but we don't misuse our donations. One backpack per migrant family. If migrants need medication, we go purchase the medication. So there's a lot of background scenes that people don't see that the migrants do need. Their kid may be sick, so they may need to see a nurse. So we connect them with public health. We get that for them. That they need clothing, we will connect them with clothing. So there's so much need out there. So we do the best we can. And a lot of the migrants are just passing through. So we do what we can for those as they're passing through and making them feel welcome. They're always so happy to see us at the bus station, knowing that we're going to be that extra resource. We are the only organization that's allowed at the bus station. We are the only organization that's at the airport, but we welcome all collaborating organizations to assist us and be part of the team.
Absolutely. I think that's what it's about. Everybody coming together and being able to help our fellow man. I think that's absolutely beautiful what you're doing. As I've said, so many great organizations. We really thank you for having taken this time to be here with us and let us know what's going on. And so again, immigrantfamiliestegether.com is the website. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Interfaithwelcomecoalition.org. Interfaithwelcomecoalition.org is the website to go to for everyone that wants to help this wonderful organization and volunteer and join the cause. Help your fellow men. So thank you, Tori. We really appreciate your time. It was wonderful chatting with you. I totally messed that one up. The immigrantfamiliestegether.com is who's coming up right now with Juan Ortiz. Hi, Juan. How are you today?
I'm doing well. It's a little hot out here in Texas, but we're in El Paso, Texas, and I'm at the space where we gather all our materials to cross over into Juarez, because unlike a lot of other organizations or groups doing this kind of work, we do it on both sides of the border. And so we're right front and center. If I can show you how close we are to the border, like literally that's the border behind me. And this is the port of entry and the crossing. I don't know which way. Yeah, that way. And so we have a steady stream right here of people coming right to the port of entry. So right in front, we literally cross into that border back here whenever we do our deliveries. And we have every manner of thing that we cross into Juarez with. And we've established over the last 3 years relationships with feminist-run collective shelters on that side, LGBTQ, really marginalized ones. We tend to stay away from the governmental ones only because they've already have help, and kind of like all of the people in the coalition that we belong to kind of all subscribe to the idea of people-powered organizations and grassroots organizations that are non-governmental. So we all kind of work off of that premise and try to do our best to have everything run by volunteers. All of these materials are gathered from people across the country by grassroots organizations that donate to immigrant families together. We're part of their Texas team. And we work on both sides. On this side, we do Food Not Walls, which is where we go into the various organizations here doing border work and help them feed migrant families. Kind of all the same things that people have been talking right now. Our whole entire top side of this building, which is a collective that bought this building and started doing this work on the border, called Casa Carmelita. And that's our physical space that we're a part of. The top level is migrant folks, mostly LGBTQ right now, which tend to be the most marginalized. But we house also volunteers. We try to go over as often as possible, especially when there's emergencies. This week, we've been helping a lot with roof leaks on the Juarez side. A lot of buildings here in El Paso aren't used to this amount of rain that we've been getting here. So we've been going over and doing what we can to help with. Most of our volunteers have experience working on the border, helping out in construction. So we have that. We do what everybody else is kind of saying. We take over material donations, which Immigrant Families Together collects from across the country. We have grandmothers in Alaska sending us handmade quilts. We have groups out of the Northeast sending us materials. IFT approaches socially conscious companies and tells them to send us stuff, and they send us stuff. So all that allows us to not have to worry about gathering, putting so much energy and resources into gathering materials, and we collect them and store them here in our space. As you can see, we practically have a shoe store. And we allow the shelter directors in Juarez to tell us what we need. We cross it over in small quantities, which is what the Mexican government allows. And we have food, whatever it is, we keep in real communication with that other side. And on this side, it's been really important because El Paso has been at the forefront of so many injustices here. A couple of blocks from here is where the Greyhound station, where the migrants were dropped off about 3 years ago, left to fend for themselves. We responded to that situation with a lot of warm clothing. It was the coldest day of the year. And right on Christmas Day, people were thrown out into the streets. And that really got us to thinking that we need to not only work on this side, but after MPP, really working on the other side where people were in encampments literally on the border. So we have tents from still in that era, sleeping bags where we were literally going onto the street, popping up a kitchen, feeding folks, getting folks warm clothes, and all from grassroots organizations, volunteer work, and non-governmental agencies, because that's right we're really trying to promote in El Paso is that that connectivity, that synergy that we've always had with Juarez and being there for each other, because we've always throughout history, especially on this part of the border where we've seen some of the most drastic injustices throughout the history of the border. We always have been really empathetic and responsive to helping out our neighbors. It's just a part of who we are, our culture here.
I want to hear about those injustices. I want to hear about the biggest issue you see. But right before we talk about that, I just want to jump in here and say that Tori Salas, who we were just talking to right before you came on, Juan, from Interfaith Welcome Coalition, she's saying that this is the exact help that she does to organizations on the border. And she's saying that you guys need to connect after this. And definitely, I love seeing this. I love seeing how immediately we can come together and help each other out. So tell us a little bit more. Let's go a little more in depth. What are those injustices? Because a lot of people that are watching us are not from border towns, and they're not Hispanics or immigrants themselves. And so I think it's important that we, just let people know what are the things you're seeing. What are the challenges that people coming across the border really face? If you would just give us a little bit of history on what you see.
Yeah, and that's one of the important things is to the highlight is that you see literally we look out our door and say in this 5-block radius, and I can point it out because it's really dramatic when you actually see it. Not far from here, the next port of entry, which is really a couple blocks down, is where people were being kept under the bridge, defecated on by birds, literally in the dirt. We were there. We saw it for ourselves. Like, this isn't something that's secondary or anecdotal. We were there. We were some of the only groups protesting those conditions. Children literally making pillows out of rocks and sleeping in the dirt under Mylar blankets. On the other side of this bridge, migrants were sleeping on the other side in tents and makeshift like encampments, and we were down there giving warm clothes, food, whatever we can, because the situation was dire. Down this way, this is all, mind you, in a 5-block radius right in our front door is where the people were being dropped at the Greyhound station. And the coldest day of the year, like I was mentioning earlier, that week 2 children had died in our community, not in anyone else's. It was Felipe, who died not too far from here, who was here right now down by the Civic Center, picked up, died near Alamogordo. For some unknown reason, he was in Alamogordo. Jacqueline Kyle died in a hospital not too far from here. So all of this has happened in a small radius. Annunciation House, which is a major shelter for folks, is not like 2 blocks from here. And a lot of the women who were being separated from their children were staying there. I got to go into the ICE facilities and pay bonds to get some of those women out through our partners at Detained Migrant Solidarity Committee. You can look them up. They do beautiful work. The Frontera Fianza Fund. Those are all part of our network. So we literally help folks since they're in the shelters in Juarez to the time they're in detainment. And all of these, mind you, are asylum-seeking folks doing something that by international law they have a right to do. And so we here have tried to bridge those things together so that we're helping migrants since the time they get into Juarez till the time they're off to their sponsors. Right now, for the group of folks that are staying up on our top floor, we're helping them find sponsors. We're helping do fundraisers to help them get their life started here. And also serving mostly marginalized communities. So half of the people we're housing right now are LGBTQ folks, trans folks that tend to have the most challenges when asking for help. And we also have all the material donations that are specifics. Like if we ask immigrant families together, they've been really beautiful about, in any given situation, if a new need arises, doing their best to send us whatever they can. And always like with humility in mind, with the best quality, not because it's for migrants. It's like shoes that are gonna last, things that are really thought out and specific to a migrant community that has to be really mobile. That's really, from one shelter to another. They have so plenty of backpacks, of like good quality backpacks, nutritious food. Whenever we do feedings, being mindful of being culturally responsive, of feeding folks nutritious food, not just whatever it is that we can buy, but actually making it and having like our families, our grandmothers and all that making, Latino food, because that's what most folks will eat, and they recognize it and they'll tend to gravitate towards that kind of food. But having this space that we bought as a collective with other organizations, and being as part of this national network that IFT has allowed us to be in, along with these other groups like Tornillo, Movimiento Cosecha. A lot of our members are here. We have We house 2 full-time activists. Organizers, community organizers that are here, and they help us with a lot of the organizational stuff. Cosecha also provides national, like whenever they have a mutual aid fund that they've been funding for the last 2 years, which has helped us a lot, literally help families during the height of COVID. We were running we were part of all the mutual aid programs. We were part of that national effort to create a national fund of mutual aid for undocumented workers. All of this, mind you, people run, people organize, and most importantly, which is a real part of our ideology, is that it's mostly directly impacted people. Cosecha's leadership are
Oh no, we're having technical
mostly
difficulties,
people
Juan.
of color. We are mostly women of color and LGBTQ women of color, actually.
That is amazing work you are doing. Thank you so much for taking this time and showing us how close you are to the border and how close you are to the crisis. And again, so if anybody wants to come help, come volunteer, come donate, where would they go for that?
You can contact IFT and tell them that they want to get connected with our El Paso efforts. Like I said, you can connect with Movimiento Cosecha. That's a national organization, but it supports our local work here. Detained Migrant Solidarity Committee does a lot for migrants in detention. Frontera Fianza Fund funds fianzas, bonds for everything from women who've been separated from their children, all to every manner of migrants that's in detention. So all of this
fianza bonds
is what runs from Frontera
fianza bonds
Fianza Fund.
Okay. I was going to say, so that helps people pay the fees to be able to exit the facilities. I think a lot of people are not aware of that fact, that in order to leave the migrant facilities, you must pay a bond.
Yes.
And so I guess that's the work that they're doing, and that is very important as well. People cannot leave these facilities unless they have some money, and if they come in with no money, then they are stuck. So this is absolutely very important that we highlight that issue, because I think, a lot of people just don't know. I think it's something very important to let them know. So Juan, thank you again so much for taking this time and showing us the important work you guys are doing. Amazing. Thank you for what you're doing.
Okay. Thank you for allowing us to talk about it. Goodbye.
Bye. Wow, I'm just so overwhelmed with how amazing all of these organizations are that are helping our communities. And these are all organizations that help people community to community. As we've seen, nobody here is doing the work of the government. It is people, and people are what we are about. That's why our name is People for Liberty. We care about the community, and we care about working with the community in giving them the support that they need. And our next guest is somebody that I am particularly familiar with. Hello, Mr. Zach Foster, my co-host of Libertarios Hispanos and Latin Libertarians. And also, you have an organization that I am so proud of the work that it's doing, and that is the Citizens Embassy. Would you like to talk about it, Zach?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Martha. Nice to meet you. You seem like a good egg. Nice to meet you for the very first time ever. I wouldn't say that I have an organization as much as I have the privilege to be part of an unincorporated association that's called the Citizens Embassy of Venezuela in the United States. This group organized a little bit over a year and a half ago, directly in response to the huge need of waves of Venezuelan migrants who are arriving here inside of our country, specifically to escape the horrors of the Venezuela crisis, which includes famine, rampant out-of-control crime, illness, lack of medicines, hospitals are crumbling, other clinics and hospitals are shutting down, and then not to mention all kinds of repression from their government. So once these folks get over here, they think that, all right, I'm arriving in the land of the free, I'm going to ask for asylum, everything's going to be easy street from now on. Obviously, they got to give it to me because the whole world knows what's going on in Venezuela, right? And unfortunately, that's wrong, because they get over here and then they realize that now they've got to go through the grinder of the migratory detention system. part of the reason that that detention system exists is for national security purposes. The federal government needs to be able to tell the mass body of U.S. citizens that they are filtering out people who are terrorists or members of drug cartels or international organizations that are, sanctions or just bad actors in general. So that's the reason why that system exists. But the problem is, in order to catch a few bad apples, you have to put all the apples in the same basket. So a lot of the folks that get caught up in migratory detention, they were already devastatingly poor before they got here, which means they don't have money for hiring a lawyer. They don't have money to pay a bond. So one of the things that we do in the Citizens Embassy is there's a mix of volunteers, Venezuelan exiles, and American-born, homegrown U.S. citizens. And one of the many services that we provide, totally free of charge, because that's what the mission all about, is we help migrants with whatever it is that they need help with legally. If they need help filling out an asylum packet, if they need help applying for TPS, if they just need a messenger so that somebody signs a form 60-001, and then the deportation officer has to share details with their case to us so that we can help their family members make informed decisions. It makes a huge difference. And we cannot exclusively take credit, because different folks that we have serviced have had different levels of resources. Some folks have lawyers, some don't. Some folks already have family members living over in the United States who could sell some things and get their bond so that they could get out of migratory detention, and other folks couldn't. So when the need gets to a particular place where just we, the body of volunteers, using nothing but our elbow grease, are no longer able to help them, then we will point them in the right direction of any particular NGO that can meet the specific need that these folks might have. But overall, just with a few volunteers working and doing honest labor on behalf of humanity, in about a year and a half, we have helped liberate over 60 people from ICE detention, and that's with no budget.
That is amazing. So what type of resources would you need to be able to grow this mission?
Well, for starters, more collaboration with NGOs who are already covering specific things. I personally was very pleased just through learning about Liberty at the Border and this particular campaign that People for Liberty is doing about different organizations such as the Fianza Fund that the last guest was talking about. All that stuff is absolutely golden, because we're going to have a need of that. For example, just last week, there's an estimation that another 10,000 Venezuelan migrants arrived crossing the Rio Grande or trying to present themselves at the ports of inspection. So on one hand, Venezuelans who have already been detained by ICE and they've had their day in court and all that stuff, it looks like they're going to be freed from detention, which is really good news. That's a small victory to relish. But on the other hand, so many more people are just now arriving. So many more people are just now going into the system. So with this new batch of folks, we and all the other NGOs that are trying to respond to this are going to have to start all over.
It's a daunting task, Zach. Do you want to tell us about one of the cases that you've worked on? What do you want to tell people? What is the most important subject or thing that you think should get across to people that are watching this?
Well, there's one particular case I could tell you guys about that happened about a month ago. I'm not going to name names, but we did have a young migrant who was a 20-year-old refugee. He had taken political action in Venezuela, protesting against the regime. So because of that, he was totally burned, and he really did, honest to goodness, qualify for asylum. He did get it granted, and he went through the legal process, but just being inside of the ICE detention center was a total nightmare. He got injured on his trek to the United States. So it was inside of ICE detention that he had an operation on his foot. And then because of political pressure, or public pressure, because when I say political, I don't want to say that it was a bunch of politicians hooting and hollering. It was literally people, just a bunch of people really mad, writing letters, making phone calls, and it was starting to make the news. So ICE let this guy go. They rushed his paperwork through, and then they kind of wheeled him to the front door of the detention center and said, "All right, congratulations, you're free." And that was it. Like that, there was no other support. The only family that this guy had was living in California, and they just released him at the front doors of his migratory detention center in Louisiana. So one thing that we did, with the help of my friend Edinson, who runs another unincorporated association called una carta salva una vida, which means a letter saves a life. He did what I call the Twilight bark. If you guys remember that old Disney movie, 101 Dalmatians, when the dog's got to get some news out so that all the other dogs can help him save the puppies from getting killed, all the dogs just across England start barking in the night. And then as one dog hears, the echo, he barks in the other direction. And then the next morning, everybody knows what's up. Everybody knows the plan. Well, that's what Edison did. He did the Twilight bark, and he went on a bunch of social media accounts, and he went on Venezuelan YouTube news, and he was telling people, hey, we've got X number of people being released. These are their needs. And in the case of this particular guy, he needs crutches. He needs some clothes because all he's got are the clothes on his back. He needs somewhere to put his head down for the night. He needs food, and he needs a plane ticket to get back to where his mother is. You actually were one of the volunteers, and I know that we're not putting too much attention on that because today is about People for Liberty and the wonderful organizations that we're partnering. It's not about us. But Martha here, my lovely co-host from Latin Libertarians, whom I've totally never met before today, she had some frequent flyer miles for an airline that she cashed in. She traded them in to help get this kid a plane ticket, and we got him a plane ticket. Somebody else collaborated to get him a delivery of 1 or 2 days worth of groceries so he could make sandwiches and have food to eat. Somebody else sent him a clothing delivery from Walmart, and they delivered it right to the door of his room because he had mobility issues. And just because people collaborated and came together and just solved a problem, they came together to solve a human need. That is the most important type of action that we have done other than helping people navigate through their paperwork. And by the way, we let people know we're not lawyers. This is just life advice. So we give them the life advice of, well, ICE has instructions in Spanish. These are the specific things that you need to do to apply for asylum. So we can help you do that. But just elbow grease, even if people are discouraged because they don't have a 501c3 already, they don't have a big budget, they haven't gotten the donors recruited yet. Folks, if you're thinking of getting into the nonprofit space to make your activism more formal, elbow grease first, do the work first. And then later on, once you guys start accomplishing things, people will come out of the woodworks to support the projects that you're doing. That's the best advice I can give as an activist.
Thank you so much, Zach, for the work you're doing. So needed. We are coming to the very end of our broadcast, believe it or not. This time has flown by. It has been amazing. So let's bring Lauren back on. If you're ready. Hello there again. I'm going to turn it over to you, Lauren.
Yeah, and Zach and Martha, thanks so much again for joining us. And I wanted to speak for a minute about our collaboration with both of your organizations. So People for Liberty is really designed to be an umbrella organization supporting the work of those, doing the grassroots efforts in the field. I love that Zach mentioned elbow grease. If you are lending your elbow grease to a cause that you care about, we want to help support your efforts. So with Libertarios Españoles and with the Citizens Embassy Project, those are two organizations, they don't have to be formal. They can be a project that you launched from your kitchen table or scribbled on the back of a napkin somewhere. Let Her Speak was just one of those efforts. People for Liberty wants to support and amplify your efforts. So we are so, very pleased to partner with Martha and Zach to amplify Libertarios Españoles as the voice of the Latin American liberty movement, and to help launch and support the Citizens Embassy that Zach and his partners have grown from the ground up. So Martha and Zach, I want to, bring y'all back up for a minute and say thank you for the work that you guys are doing. And we're excited to help you grow those efforts. So for people who are interested, why don't you tell them about your 2 weekly broadcasts? You have one in English and one in Spanish where people can keep up with your efforts.
That is correct. So we are here on People for Liberty in Spanish on Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we talk about different issues of the Latin American community in Spanish to hopefully connect with the people in the community who need to hear about liberty or who, just talking about the different issues that are so important in our community. And then on LPTV on Wednesday nights, same time, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, we talk in English. Sometimes the same show, pretty much. Sometimes it's completely different. It's a different audience. We talk about just the issues here in the United States for the Latin community and educating You don't have to be Hispanic to listen to this. We want to make sure that people within the liberty movement know what's going on in Latin America with a libertarian perspective, because sometimes it's not really talked about the way things we think should be talked about. There's sometimes too much of a political spin on things. So those are our two organizations. And like I said, Zach, with the embassy, the Citizens Embassy, this past week, we actually had a lot of movement on an initiative done where we call up our representatives who are sending money to the government of Venezuela and keeping that going. We've now launched a second phase, which is contacting also the government in Canada. Zach, I think you should speak more on that since you are the resident expert.
Well, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the background of that, just out of respect for the organization and legal implications. But long story short, your and my taxpayer money for many years has been going to finance anti-drug missions for a regime that ended up becoming a literal drug cartel. And also U.S. taxpayer money has gone to financing a false opposition who has not been the great defenders of democracy with our tax money that our government has been sending them for almost 20 years now. They have actually taken a lot of steps to help that regime stay in power. And the fact that our government is financing these people and paying them for the privilege of betraying many of our freedom brothers, because a lot of the people connected to this organization indirectly are, my friends who are activists who live in that country. People who share all of our views and people who take action to help people very similarly to we do. We think it's absolutely unacceptable. So one project that we've been doing is called Phone Calls for Freedom. That's the English name of the campaign. Anybody who wants to go to VenezuelanEmbassy.org, which is the website for the Citizens Embassy, click on news and you'll see two different articles for Phone Calls for Freedom. That's got all the details of the phases, what this is about, the reasons that we're doing this, the specific demands that the Venezuelan people and any other volunteers are trying to communicate to the members of the U.S. government and all the also members of the Canadian government, because they're sending money down there to finance that nonsense, thinking that they're helping and not actually making the situation worse. So you can contact them and tell them, hey, this is the truth. This is the real situation. We've already had a few thousand Venezuelans around the world participate in their own initiative and say, hey, please stop funding this. Yep. This guy that your government recognizes, we don't recognize him. He's part of the enemy. Just let us free ourselves. And also the most important point that they're communicating, other than our taxpayers ought not to be sending more money to this drug cartel, is folks, just get out there and do activism, fight for freedom. You do not need anybody's permission. This is about humanity here. This is about something much higher. Well, so while Citizens Embassy does human stuff, there is another side of our activism.
Yep. And I love that that's a perfect transition to bring in Holly and Dan as we talk about how this is just the start of opportunities for people to act for liberty. So Zach and Martha, thank you again for joining us. And for everyone who's tuned in today, we will be sending a follow-up email and give you opportunities to act for liberty. So Dan and Holly, let's talk about next steps in action.
So, the transition of Zach talking about, that it is action that makes a big difference. That's one of the things that People for Liberty is really dedicated to. And today, is a day where we saw a lot of people who are taking action. And it's very meaningful to me that our name is People for Liberty, because it's meaningful that, in our Constitution, we start off, we the people. It's the people who make things happen. And one of the reasons that we're seeing so much activism in this space is because it's a space where the government is causing the problem. The government isn't helping. And what we know is that if the people are allowed to help, they'll be so much more effective than anything else. And Zach talked about the need for people to show up at places and for us to have protests. And Juan talked about that too, about how his organization has been very effective in using protests to change the way people are seeing things and to change what happens. And that's something that's been very important for us with People for Liberty. And so I want to briefly go to our website and show One of the things that is really important. So for people who don't know, our website is peopleforliberty with the number 4.org. On there's a whole bunch of stuff that we're doing. But one of the critical things that we're doing is we want you to tell us about the stuff that's happening. There are so many people who want to get involved in activism. They want to know, oh, this is going on in Houston. This is going on in El Paso. This is going on in New York City. I want to be there for that. And so you can come in here and you can register your event. We're going to make you log in because, we just had to make sure that the events that are coming in are legitimate events. But please, if there's something that your organization is doing, if there's a protest going on, something that you need people to, come and bring them into this event. Once they do, they go through and we'll take a look at them, and you'll see that we have a big calendar of all the events that are going on. This is...
Sorry, I want to highlight too, these aren't just our events. We're showcasing a broad coalition of liberty events from around the states. If your event is about people and liberty, register it. We're not here to do anything other than uplift and support the message of liberty and people for liberty. I think that's really important to highlight here.
Yeah, and Casey made a great comment on the feed. Partisan and nonpartisan events. The Freedom Run Ride, right? That's not about a particular political issue, right, left, or anything like that. It's about freedom, and people are running, and I'm assuming riding as well. This is one of the critical things that we're doing is we're bringing in people for liberty, gathering them together, sharing this resource of a lot of the activism that's happening. And there's another way that we can sort of share activism that allows volunteers to get involved. And that's through our legislation program, Affecting Liberty Legislation. And if you come to our main page, engage, Affecting Liberty Legislation. And Holly, maybe you could talk a little bit about what's going on here with that.
Absolutely. And so one of our trademarks that we have is consent culture. And the government likes to act like legislation is your form of consent. And legislation continues to impede individual liberties, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. And we believe in collecting and acting on behalf of liberty through legislation. So we have an amazing tracker here that if you know of any legislation in your area, be it county, be it state, be it federal, register it, log it in. We can organize, we can highlight. If there's a law that's impeding individual liberties, it doesn't matter where it is. We want to know about it. We don't think the government should be legislating or signing away anybody's individual consent for liberty just because it's a piece of paper that says something. And it can be something that's opposing liberty, or oftentimes we're seeing legislation now that's coming out that's pro-liberty and pro-individual rights. And we want to highlight that too. It's an important way.
Getting people to the state houses to testify for liberty in those cases.
Absolutely. Getting people to act for liberty. It's one thing to talk and have conversations. And I think one of my favorite things that we talked about today was that it wasn't just talk, right? We saw people in action. We saw people actually acting for liberty, and affecting liberty legislation is another way to do that. Take your feet to the courthouse and let your legislators and your representatives that are elected hear what you have to say. We think that's important, and we want to make sure that we're highlighting every aspect. So if you go to the bottom, it's peopleforliberty.org/legislation, 4 with the number 4. Register your legislation. If you want to look at areas to lobby or speak out against or for, you can find legislation there too.
And I was going to say, it's critical thing about it. The whole point of a legislative body is that it is the body that represents the people. Your opinion and your words matter on that floor. So find out about liberty affecting legislation that's in your area. Tell us about it, or come here and find liberty affecting legislation and make your voice heard. Getting in there, speaking to your representative in person. Sometimes there's public comment on the floor. You guys, we all can make a difference with just our voices, but we actually have to use our feet to get to a spot where people can hear us.
Well, and I want to share a little bit as well, Dan. If you can bring the website back up, let's show people the Liberty on the Border event series page, because today was just the start of what we anticipate will be a much larger effort. With Martha and Zach, we will be visiting some of the detention facilities in person in Texas, Florida, and in New York in the coming months, in August, September, November, October. So on our website, under the Engage section, you'll find information about the Liberty on the Border series. So you'll also find it on the events page because we did an event today. But if you'd like to keep up with those activities that we'll be sharing, Dan, let's show them where they can register that they're interested. There we go.
Right here at the bottom of the page. And again, it's peopleforliberty.org, liberty-on-the-border, or come up to the engage menu up at the top, Liberty on the Border series. And this is a series. This is not a issue that we're going to solve with one webcast.
Yes.
It's going to require boots on the ground, people carrying signs, getting involved. We need you to get involved there.
And we do have locations where we are getting involved. Lauren, I think you can talk a little bit more to that.
I can. So if you are interested in learning more, we'll be on the ground in Texas, in Florida, and in New York, as I shared. Let us know that you're interested. And if you want to be a part of those in-person efforts, we will get you the information. We'll also share those events as they are confirmed. But I want to share with everyone, 10 minutes was a really short time for people to talk about their organizations. So we will be doing some follow-up Liberty Lunch broadcasts with Christy and with Juan and with Tori. So a big thank you to everyone who's tuned in today. We know we ran a little bit over, but it's hard when there is so much critical information and passion we want to share. So thank you to everyone for tuning in. Dan and Holly, kind of closing thoughts?
I wish we had more time. Every single person, there's always a production element, and I feel so terrible when I say, okay, we got to wrap, because I'm listening. There's so much engagement. There's so much that people can do to help. And I just wish there's more time. I'm glad we have Liberty Lunches, and I'm so excited that we can continue this narrative in a larger context.
Well, and I want to say a special thank you to Martha Bueno for sharing her time and talents helping to interview these organizations today. Martha is a phenomenal advocate for liberty. She and Zach do a great job with Libertarios Hispanios. I hope everyone will tune in. Dan?
Yeah. And then the last thing I want to say, I just want to talk about it. I wore this shirt today specifically. Todos somos inmigrantes. It's a really important message. And, I love one of the things that Christy said earlier about the faith that's involved and the importance of welcoming the stranger. That speaks to our humanity. That thing that binds us together is this human experience. And that's what we're about. When we say people for liberty, we're not isolating one group or another group. It's all of us together. And this is a place where we get to be people, and we get to be humans, and we get to care for our fellow human beings. And that is the thing that brings us together in this world that seems so divided. It's caring for each other. I'm really proud of the work that all these organizations are doing, and that we were able to help them by highlighting them. And so I hope people will stay involved.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in this Saturday. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Bye, guys.